She's a mother on a mission. She comes to Jesus with an outrageous request. With laser-sharp focus and a rocket-fueled determination, she enters into the presence of Jesus and kneels down. In Matthew chapter 20, if you've got your Bibles, look at the request. Matthew 20, verses 20 and 21. She is the mother of Zebedee's sons, and we know who they are. Matthew 20, verses 20 and 21. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to him with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" And she said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left, in your kingdom." But Jesus answered and said, "You do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink and be baptized with the baptism that I am to be baptized with?" Here is a mother. And I almost have a smile on my face when I read this, because it's almost comical. You know who the sons of Zebedee were. Who are they? All right, we've got James and John. And James and John had worked up a reputation. What were they known as? They were known as the sons of thunder. I don't know what they did to earn that reputation, but they had that reputation. Sounds to me like they should have been in some kind of comic book, hero thing. All right, here come the sons of thunder. But here they are pushing Mum, I guess, in. "Mum, can you go and ask Jesus a question for us?" And so in goes Mum and the two sons of thunder behind her. And she kneels down at the feet of Jesus with an outrageous request, at least if you're one of the other disciples. She says, "Can my boys, James and John, these fiery boys, can one sit there and one sit there when you come into your kingdom?" I want you to notice Jesus' response. He doesn't shut them down. He just says, "Boys, sons of thunder, can you drink the cup that I'm about to drink? Can you take the pathway that I'm about to take?" One can analyze what was in the mother's thinking, and no doubt she sees Jesus as somebody who is coming into his kingdom, and she's kind of working out what that kingdom will be like, and there will be prestige and power and hierarchies and power and all kinds of things, and somehow she wants her boys to be part of that. She's going to learn, as those two boys are going to learn, that the way of following Jesus, to become a true disciple of Jesus, is not about glory and honor and prestige and power and hierarchies, but the pathway of descent. What that mother wants, if you tear it away, all of the other things that she thinks she's going to get, at the end of the day, I kind of admire what she's asking, because what she wants is really what I want, isn't it? What we want. She wants closeness to Jesus. She wants her boys to be close to Jesus. And so she says, "May they sit at your right hand and on your left." When I think about that, is that what we desire today as a church community? That closeness to Jesus. Are there levels of closeness to Jesus? Yes, there is. And I'll show you that in just a moment. There are levels. Seems like around Jesus there were these circles of relationship, circles of influence, circles of closeness that some are going to take to get closer and closer and closer to Jesus Christ. We call that discipleship. At the end of the day, that's what it is. The discipleship journey is a journey that we take in order to get closer and closer and closer and closer to Jesus Christ. And Jesus says, as you are a disciple, as you are becoming a disciple, as you're learning to stay connected with me, as you're learning what this is about, I also want you to influence others on that same journey. Now, we call that the Great Commission, don't we? And it was read beautifully for us this morning, Matthew 28. Now, you know that, don't you? You know that one. I don't think my clicker's working. So I'm going to put it up for you. Can you turn the slide for me? Thank you. Next one. Got some pictures to show you. Next one. Jesus go therefore and make disciples. Take this journey. Take this journey of closeness with me. Baptizing, yes, and then teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And thankfully, this is true. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of it. So the discipleship journey is a journey that we take to get closer and closer and closer to Jesus. And as we are learning that, we are to invite others to take that journey with us. Is that okay? In a sense, the last command of Jesus is the first priority of the church. It's to become a disciple on this journey of closeness to Jesus and to invite others to take that journey with us as we experience it, because we cannot share what we haven't experienced ourselves with somebody else. You know, people often say, how are we going to grow our church? What's the great strategy? You know, I guess for my sins, I'm 50% in the office as church growth, and people ask me, church growth director, what are we going to do? Now, I can roll out some really interesting strategies, but this one is the best. Go therefore and make disciples. Be one and make one. Invest your life in other people. You know, there are 2 instances in the Bible where Jesus says something is finished. Can you name the one? Name them? Probably think of the last one, where Jesus said something was finished. On the cross, right? He said it is finished. What was finished on the cross? I can say, well, the mission given, a mission of salvation, message given, a God of love who loves the world. But there's another instance where Jesus said something was finished. Can you remember that one? Anybody? Oh, John 17:4. Let's go there. John 17:4. Here's what it says. Jesus says in John 17, this is prior to the cross. The cross hasn't happened yet. He's got the group of disciples around him. And Jesus says, in that chapter, I have glorified you on the earth. I have finished the work that you have given me to do. Now, what was the work that was finished? I mean, the cross hasn't come yet. I'm going to suggest to you what was finished then. And if you notice John chapter 17, it's in the chapter on prayer, right? Jesus is praying. Who does he pray for? Do you remember 3 parts to the prayer? Prays for himself, then he prays for the 12, and then he prays for those disciples that would come in every generation. That's you and I. Those who would begin that journey of closeness to Jesus Christ. I'm going to suggest to you, mission, message on the cross, but the one method that will outdo every method, the one method that will help us in every generation is this. Jesus invested his life in people. He shared life with people. He told the good news of the kingdom to people, and he made disciples. That's the one method that is still going to work, folks. Share life and tell others about Jesus Christ. That's how I boil it down. The Great Commission. We call it the Great Commission. It should really be the Everyday Commission. Because when you put great in front of it, I mean, we may just back off a little bit. It's so great. We were Great Britain once before Brexit and all kinds of stuff. I don't want to get political this morning. That's why I'm here today. That's why I can stand before you today and preach this sermon. The method of Jesus, it will always work. In fact, the Bible tells us. Next slide, please. This is John 15:8. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, so you will be my disciples. This is the method in every generation. Somebody invested in it. Now, let me show you this picture. This is a picture. Next slide, please. Go back. You can go back, please. Yeah. Anybody guess who that is? That is my mum and dad on their wedding day. Now, you will note that I do not take after my father. I'll probably take after my mum. My mum's rather short. I'm rather short. My dad's big. He was big. He's not as big as that now. Something happens as you get older, right? You shrink a little bit. I don't understand that. That's my dad, really tall. Very muscular guys. I don't know if you can get a sense of the hands, the size of my father's hands on that picture. I felt them a few times. I know they were big. Let me tell you something about my father. My father grew up on a building site. He's generational builder, building things. And my dad gained a reputation because of his size and because of the size of his hands. If anybody upset my father, he had one way, one method only of dealing with people. So anybody said anything bad against my dad, he would just take their hand, take them out from the work hut, and take them to an isolated part of the building site, and there he would administer what I would term the right hand of fellowship. And it was probably the left hand of fellowship, the right foot of fellowship, and all the fellowships you can think of. My dad got it to such a T. Now, some of you remember knuckle dusters. How many of you remember knuckle dusters? You remember knuckle dusters? My dad had one of those. He still got it. It's in a matchbox. I'm going to inherit that one day. Not to use it, but to remember. In that matchbox, my dad, he because he's a builder, he stuck a nail through the back of it. So a little spike that came through the knuckle duster. And of course, anybody upset my father, it was... There are probably people still alive today with scars from that period of my father's life. That's the way he was dealing with things. But I want to tell you that on that building site, Jesus had a disciple of Jesus who was interested in getting closer to Jesus and inviting others on that journey. And to cut a long story short, they ended up building a wall together, and within 3 weeks, my father found Jesus Christ. My father found Jesus Christ. The guy's name was Harold. He'd learned to share his life, share his belief in Jesus, the Prince of Peace. You know, you don't have to go and beat up everybody. My father came to faith. That's the wedding day. It's very interesting that, if you can go to the next slide, very interesting, I found a messenger, an old messenger. Can I have the next slide, please? A messenger article where it's actually reported the day my father and then my mother actually got baptized. And it says in there, I can't read it because I ain't got my glasses on, but it says in there, my father was largely responsible for bringing his fiancée, that's my mum, to faith in Jesus Christ. This is how it works. Next slide. And then I came into the family. Keep going. That's me. I had more hair in those days. You know, people that used to know my dad said, and he brought other people on the building site to faith in Jesus Christ. And I was raised as a Christian, as a Seventh-day Adventist. That's why I'm here today. Because he invested his life in me and showed me things. But we'd often have visitors from the building site that would come. And they say, you won't believe some of the things your dad did. And I couldn't believe it. I only saw it once, and I was about this age, and I was out playing with the neighbor's kids and must have said something to one of them that I didn't know because he hit me. And I went into my home with a bloodied nose, and my father took one look at me, took hold of my hand. I'm thinking, what's happening now? He rushed me out of the door. We got into his white building van with all his equipment and his tools in it, and we were racing up and down those streets. Look, was it him? Was it him? Was it him? Half of me saying, I can't wait to find this guy. The other half of me was saying, hold on, don't want my dad to do anything that's going to upset him. Now, I thought that was the only occasion I saw that nature. A few months ago, last year, I took a 7-hour car journey with my dad, and it was a great opportunity to have a chat. And he told me, no, Simon, there was another time. He said, I'd just been baptized. Your mother was pregnant with you, and there was somebody on that workforce, nobody liked him, and he said something to me, and I hit him. He said, I was disciplined over that, but they didn't sack me because everybody wanted to hit him. I was the only one who did it. He said, I went to the local pastor. And I said, you've got to chuck me out of the church. You need to disfellowship me because I just hit somebody. And the pastor was very wise and a kind man, sat down, questioned him, and saw this guy, really was repentant. He said, try and put it right. God will forgive you. You stay in the church. You're a disciple maker. Keep making disciples. I praise God for him. Praise God for him. He said a few years later, I was out doing ADRA collection. I knock on the door, and who comes to the door but the guy I hit? And it's funny how God works. He said he recognized me. I recognized him. I'm holding the ADRA tin. He says, I think I know you. My dad said, I think I know you. In fact, I think I hit you many, many years ago. Just want to tell you, I've become a Christian, and I'm just really sorry. And by the way, I'm just collecting for ADRA. Would you talk about an awkward moment? That's an awkward moment, isn't it? But he said the guy didn't say a word, went back, got a pound, put it in, shut the door, didn't say a word. Disciple making can be very interesting. We're on this journey of closeness to Jesus Christ. It's interesting. Let me identify some of those circles of influence for you in the next couple of minutes. Is that okay? We can look through the life of Jesus and we can begin to see circles of closeness. There are a few of them. Shall we begin? I want to start with this circle. We start with what the Bible calls the great crowds, multitudes. All right? James 4:8 tells us, draw near to God and he will draw close to you. He will draw. How far do you want to go in this journey of discipleship with Jesus Christ? How far do you want to go? We start in the Gospels with the great crowds. There were large crowds that always gathered around Jesus because they saw in Jesus somebody who spoke with authority. He was a man who said what he would do and did what he said. Jesus used the crowds, the large crowds, as a way of planting seeds so that some of them would step out of the crowds and begin to follow him. The characteristic of the crowd is that the crowds would turn up and they would do two things. They would watch and they would listen because they were curious about this man. They were curious about Jesus. They were curious about Jesus. Think of it, the crowds. The problem with the crowds was this, that the crowds would often turn up and they did two things. They would watch and they would listen. Now we all start there. We all start being curious about Jesus. We all start with watching and listening. What's all this about? What's Adventism about? What's Christianity? Who's this Jesus? We start off watching and we start off listening. But we shouldn't stay there. That's the problem with the crowd. If we just come and we watch and we listen, we watch and we watch and we listen, we listen, we listen, we watch. But we don't go the next step. Crowds can become a problem. They become a problem in the New Testament, right? Do you remember? Zacchaeus can't see Jesus because of the crowd. There are 4 men carrying their friend to Jesus. They can't get to see Jesus. Why? Because of the crowd. Now they're creative people and had to go on the roof and do some funny things to get that man to Jesus. You see, this is the problem if we only stay at the watch and listen. If I just turn up, if our church is a bunch of spectators that turn up for weekly lectures and we stay here, our journey stops. And so Jesus invites us, no, come from the crowd. Come from the crowd. Come from just simply watching and listening. Now we get another group. Now we could call these, if we go into the second circle, we could have the 5,000. Here are a group that start following Jesus because they feel that Jesus can meet their needs. I'm not just watching and listening. I suddenly recognize in him somebody that can do something for me. I can get my needs met. Is that a legitimate place to be? Yes. Can Jesus supply our needs? Yes. Can Jesus help? Yes. Should we be meeting the needs of the people around us? So that they can see a God who cares and loves them? Yes. You know, every time I plant a church, we always have fellowship lunches every week without exception. There's something incredible that happens when you eat food with people. It's an evangelistic strategy. I recommend it. Beautiful. I remember when we started, I got this anonymous letter once. I just preached the sermon. I sat down and somebody anonymous, I hate anonymous letters. Somebody had written to me, Pastor, help us. We're turning into a restaurant. Why? Because we feed hungry people every Sabbath? Don't you know that your Sabbath keeping is actually valid if we're helping people and feeding people during the week and providing their needs? In this journey with Jesus, we may start being curious. I'm watching and listening. Then I get to a point where I see in Jesus, I see in his church that my needs can be met, and that's legitimate. But it's not the place to stay. So out with this crowd, we can call them the 5,000. The 5,000 keep turning up because they know that Jesus can feed and heal them. That's why they keep turning up, and Jesus gets it. And he still feeds them. So he says to the disciples, feed them. What's he doing? He's been an incredible disciple maker. In asking them to feed the 5,000, Jesus is saying this. 1, I want you to be aware of the needs around you. 2, I want you to be the ones to meet the needs around you. And 3, I will resource you to meet the needs of those around you. What a beautiful lesson, amen? Out comes this little boy who has the answer to feeding the 5,000. What's he got? Not a lot. I'm glad he had more bread than fish because I'm a vegetarian. 5 loaves, 2 fishes. And I want you to notice what Jesus did. What Jesus did. It says, this is what it says. He took the bread, he blessed the bread, he broke the bread, he gave the bread, right? Isn't that what he did? It's very interesting. Every time in the scriptures where you see Jesus and bread, the same pattern emerges. We do it at communion, right? We take the bread, we bless the bread, we break the bread, we give the bread. two disciples on the way to Emmaus after the resurrection. Jesus comes to them. They don't know who he is until they sit at the table with Jesus. And then it says, when he took the bread, when he blessed the bread, when he broke the bread, when he gave the bread, their eyes are open. They saw it was Jesus Christ. That little boy represents those who say, in my journey of closeness with Jesus, I'm moving away from my own needs. I'm here. I need my needs met. The church must look after my needs. No, that little boy represents those who will step out from my needs to the kingdom agenda, and we begin to see the needs around us, the bigger picture. And just as Jesus took that bread, blessed that bread, broke the bread, and shared that bread, that's exactly what he wants to do with us and our lives as disciples on our journey with closeness. What's the next group? Well, we go from the 5,000. Can you think of another group that suddenly get into the kingdom agenda? We could go to a number 70. Luke 10, Jesus sends out the 70. These are now the workers and the servers. We can see that they are working and they are serving. And God blesses them and empowers them. And they go out and they try and make disciples for Jesus Christ. They perform all kinds of incredible things. You say, that's a great place to be. It is. It's a wonderful place to be. But you know what I've learned even as a pastor? I can be serving and working and doing all of this stuff, but not be still connected to Jesus in the way that Jesus wants me to be. I've had this so many times. The Holy Spirit has prompted me. You know, Simon, these words flow very easily from your lips. In fact, easy from the lips, but far from the heart. You need to bring somebody once said the longest journey you'll ever take is from your head to your heart. It's a long journey to bring the words that we speak that flow so nicely and put them into action so that I'm just not serving. It's interesting in Luke 10, there are 3 sections to Luke 10. It starts with the sending of the 70. Then it talks about the Good Samaritan, which makes sense because here's some folks that go out to help others. But the whole chapter ends with the Mary and Martha scenario where Jesus has gone to the home of Mary and Martha is busy serving while Mary is content to be connecting. I could tell you some really humorous stories here, but I don't have the time. I'm looking at the clock. About how God has confronted me in my ministry so many times with, you need to get real with me. Don't hide behind serving what you lack in connecting with me. Be connected. Stay connected. You need to be connected. Jesus said, if I am lifted up, I will draw all men to me. There is a drawing work in this discipleship journey, and so I don't stay with the 70. Then we go to the 12. What are the 12 like? Well, they leave and they follow. Jesus sets up a community where they're going to learn to live with each other, where they're going to be transformed. Jesus says, follow me and I will make you into fishers of men. In the call is the best definition I can think of a disciple. A disciple follows. That means I have to be behind Jesus. Jesus is ahead of me. I follow him. I acknowledge his life. I acknowledge his teachings. I acknowledge these things. The middle part we can come a little unstuck on sometimes because it says, I will make you. That's transformation. Something's got to happen in our lives and in our hearts. How often have I baptized critical, hypocritical, judgmental people with the hope that the Holy Spirit will take them, and 5 years on, and I meet them 5 years later and they're still hypocritical, judgmental. What's happening? The transformation. In our walk with Jesus, we need a transformation. And the best way to get transformed is actually in community, because as we relate to each other, we grow best. I mean, you look at the disciples, you've got James and John, sons of thunder. You've got Simon the zealot with Matthew the tax collector. Zealots will carry little 3-inch blades to kill people like Matthew. And Jesus puts them all in community and says, work it out. Because in relating to your differences, you're going to grow as Christians. That's the only way the New Testament knows that we grow spiritually, is in tension with each other. So he says, follow me. The 12. Can you get closer to Jesus than the 12? Where would you go from 12? There's another number. 3. Remember the mother's prayer. Skip that one, I haven't got time for that. Who are the 3? Peter, James, and John. James, and John, sons of thunder. Now, there's something, if you read the Gospels, it's not that Jesus was showing favoritism. Remember, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. How far are you willing to go? These guys seem to be the inner circle. They seem to be able to go to places where the others didn't go. They're on the Mount of Transfiguration to see the glory of God, but they're in Gethsemane, a little closer to where Jesus is praying because they will see His suffering. They recognize that you cannot see glory as a Christian without the pathway of suffering. Peter, James, and John. Can you get even closer? Can we get closer? Who makes it from the three into what I would call the one? What do we call him? What does he call himself? The disciple that Jesus loved. John. John, who seemed to go just a little bit closer in his discipleship journey. John, who wrote more words, more of the spoken words of Jesus than any of the gospel writers. John, who said so many times in the gospel, he says, abide in him, abide in him. John, who records Jesus saying, I no longer call you servants, I call you what? I call you, you're not the 70 now, I call you friends. John, who was always the first to recognize Jesus on the shore. John, who has his head on the chest of Jesus at the Last Supper. Even Peter knows when Jesus says somebody around this table is going to betray me. Peter wants to know who it is. That's Peter. Gets a message to John. John asks him. Peter knows he needs to go through John to speak to Jesus about this important issue. John, the only disciple at the cross. Jesus would look at John and say, behold your mother. Mother, behold your son. John, who wasn't martyred. John, who was put on an island. He's in exile. And there, as a direct fulfillment of the words of Jesus, who says, to those who love me and keep my words, I will reveal myself. And on that island, John receives a beautiful vision of his day all the way down to the end of things, when Jesus will return in the clouds of heaven with great glory because he had suffered the pathway of discipleship. That's John. And you remember how John finishes his book. I mean, he says, Jesus turned to Peter and said, Peter, when you were young, you did what you want, you went. He says, but when you are old, you will go to a place you do not want to go. And Peter, being Peter, turned to Jesus, and evidently John is just behind. And Peter says, well, what about him? What about him? And of course, Jesus says, basically, my paraphrase, mind your own business, Peter. If he should live until I come, what's that to you? And then that rumor went around that John would never die. John. Dear ones, the journey of discipleship. The journey of discipleship. I want to get closer to Jesus. Where am I? Am I just a watcher and a listener? I just turn up and I just want to watch and listen. I'm just curious. I just want to hear the message and I'm going to go and do nothing with that. Am I here because I can get my needs met? And that's okay for a while. None of these are illegitimate. But it's a journey. It's a pathway journey. Am I here simply because I get my needs met? And if I don't get my needs met, I'm going somewhere else where they will? Am I serving and working hard, but still need to be further connected to the living God? Am I leaving and following? Am I part of a community in which I'm being transformed and changed? Cannot be a disciple of Jesus unless you're into the mission of Jesus. We can have the mission of Jesus, the message of Jesus, and the method of Jesus. Am I the three? Or as I'd like to be this morning, I would love a new vision and a fresh vision of who Jesus is. I would like Jesus to manifest him and give me that sense of who he is and his mission in the world. To relive that calling as a disciple and to say, I'm on this journey. I want to get closer and closer and closer and closer to you. And as I learn more about my relationship with you, how to relate to the invisible God, as I learn these things, I'm going to invite some people to come on this journey with me. And I can invite them because I know something of what I need to be investing my life in with these people. What the church needs today, what we need today, my dear ones, is that vision of Jesus again. That on the Isle of Patmos, John received as one who had gone so close that God could reveal himself to him in a special way. I pray this morning that we would take that journey. We'd ask the question, where am I in this journey? Because Jesus wants to draw us closer, ever closer to him. May we continue that journey with him. Amen.